Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Studios Online. My name is Vanessa, and I'm from the Studios programming team. Thank you for joining us today for week 4 of our Artist Dialogues. In this final week of the Artist Dialogues, we are excited to present a new work that was part of the original Studios 2020 lineup, the audio experience of Lucas Ho's The Heart Comes to Mind, a co-production with Checkpoint Theatre. The Heart Comes to Mind was caught right in the heart of the circuit breaker measure announcement, and so its mode of presentation is the result of art making in this new normal that we find ourselves in. With The Heart Comes to Mind, we are treated to a marriage of the poetic lyricism of Lucas's writing, the sonic interpretation of the text by composer-musicians Shah Tahir and Ryan Sim, and the dynamic acting of Xuan and Julius that grips your mind's eye. And of course, all of this delicately directed by Claire Wong. So, this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce some of the team behind it all. We first have Lucas Ho, playwright of The Heart Comes to Mind and associate artist of Checkpoint Theatre, Claire Wong, director and co-dramaturg of The Heart Comes to Mind, and joint artistic director of Checkpoint. And we also have our lovely cast, actor Julius Fu, who plays Peter, the father character, and Un Xuan, who plays Lin, his daughter. Last but not least, it is also my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's session, Huzir Sulaiman, who is well placed to moderate this session as co-dramaturg of the show and joint artistic director of Checkpoint. So please join me in saying hello to all of them. Now, some housekeeping measures before we begin. The artists will first discuss the genesis and making of this audio experience. So please feel free to leave a comment below with your questions for the team. Huzir will then field as many questions as time allows in the latter half of this dialogue. And with that, over to you, Huzir.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for the introduction. To those of you just joining us on Facebook, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And as we chat with the creative team of The Heart Comes to Mind, do leave your thoughts and questions in the comment section below, as Vanessa has said, and do our best to respond to as many of them as time permits. So it's my pleasure today to facilitate today's conversation on The Heart Comes to Mind, an honest and poetic exploration of the shifting currents between father and daughter as they wrestle with the loss of their wife and mother. Lucas Ho, the playwright, Lucas and I met 14 years ago at NUS, and he was part of my first batch of playwriting students in the English department. And we've worked together over the years as friends and colleagues on various projects. He first began as an associate producer at Checkpoint, then as an associate artist. We've worked with him as a playwright. He's edited several of our playwriting anthology volumes. And of course, he is also in his own right an educator both at NUS and SOTA, the School of the Arts. He also has taken over now the playwriting class that I very first encountered him in, that I taught him in many years ago. I had the privilege of directing his first full-length play, Fraggle, directed, and Claire Wong produced. So my first question is to Lucas today. Fraggle bore witness to the struggles of Singaporean men in the Army reservist system. But now with The Heart Comes to Mind, we once again explore the unspoken fears and desires of men, but this time by looking at fatherhood. So what's been your journey like as a playwright, and how did the idea for The Heart Comes to Mind come about?
Yeah, I've had thank you for the introduction, Huzir. I've had a very interesting journey as a playwright. I think simply because, yes, I took your class 14 years ago. My goodness, and I spent a good my first job out of university was a teacher, but I was allowed to hang around Checkpoint Theatre even then to see you and Claire at work, and I think that's where I learned a lot of things about theatre. Just hanging around Checkpoint. And so at some point, I think after about 5 years, I left teaching to pursue playwriting full time, just to give myself space and room to write full length plays, not just short little things that being a full time teacher allowed. And one thing I realized is that as a playwright, I write stories that, or I write plays that I can't find out there. I write stories that don't quite exist yet. So I distinctly recall, I think, asking myself the question, okay, there are stories and plays about NS boys, right? There's stories and plays about the 2 years NS experience, but then we also know that men go back for 10 years after that. And why isn't there anything written about that? So I did some research and nothing had been written. And so I started writing that play, Frags, in 2017. And it was a similar thought process that led to me writing The Heart Comes to Mind. Simply because I became a father for the first time in 2016. And I was just trying to, and it's a whirlwind of emotions. It's a logistical challenge. And I was trying to find any kind of writing, right, either fiction or nonfiction, that dealt with the process about a man becoming a father, written from a male perspective. There's a lot of stuff out there that is written from a mother's perspective, right? But there was very little things written about a man becoming a father. And because my first child is a daughter, it's an even smaller, it's a shrinking Venn diagram, right? Work specifically written about fathers writing about daughters, it's very hard to find. So I just chose to start writing a story about a father and daughter myself, trying to explore what it means to take care of a newborn baby girl for the first time. Yeah.
You've described it as a speculative memoir. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah. I call it a speculative memoir. So just to break down that term, right, which I realize I coined and sounds a bit pretentious, but it's a memoir.
Cool. I wish I thought of it.
Thank you. I call it a memoir because there are bits in the play that draw from my own experience, right? It's not autobiographical. It's not a direct kind of blow by blow account of what I was going through as a young father. But yeah, I'm just trying to capture the very raw experience of caring for a daughter and the swirl of thoughts that comes from me. But it's speculative because, the earlier drafts didn't have this speculative element, right? The first few drafts were just very immediately focused on what I was going through as a father. And then as I developed the play, I found it just more creatively fulfilling and more productive to push it into the future, 30 years from now. Because if I were writing it in the present, then my daughter would be 3 years old, and she wouldn't have a lot of lines, right? Or it would be very limited vocabulary. So I pushed it 30 years in the future, and then it allowed me to not be so focused on myself as a father. I had to create this whole other character, the daughter, and in that process, I decided, why not take it even further, right? Why not push the speculative bit even further, which is to make the daughter as different from who I am as a human being. So I'm a 30-something male writer, and I decided to make the daughter a scientist, a female scientist. So that was something that was out of my comfort zone. I had to do research on and talk to people. And then the play started to open up, and a lot more interesting possibilities came into play, right? So, yeah, also it was just for me creating the character of the daughter, aside from taking me out of writing the father bit. It pushed me in a whole different direction, because with Fraggle, I was dealing with like 10 middle-aged men. So now I decided, let's just set that aside and look at the female experience, which for me is always a struggle to create, because I'm not a female. So it's speculative on those planes of thought, right? It's set in it's me projecting in the future, and also it's me trying to inhabit the shoes of another human being.
But I think it's a wonderful yoking of the sort of biographical authenticity, the emotional authenticity, the specificity of details from a life lived, together with the powers of the imagination and projecting forward, which has always been the province of the writer. Yes, thank you. So let's turn to the pandemic in the room. So I will address this to Claire. With COVID-19 in Checkpoint Theatre, we had to make the painful decision to postpone our first planned production of 2020, which was The Nuclear Family. And this was long before, this was exactly when DORSCON Orange was declared by the Ministry of Health, and that asked event organizers to call off all events. So we did so, and this was before social distancing measures and before circuit breaker measures were in place. So going into rehearsals for The Heart Comes to Mind, that's when we started to see the progressive deployment of social distancing measures, more information coming out about the disease, and sort of a more codified and systematic response on the part of the authorities. So it made us very aware of the circumstances and very sensitive to what was going on. So for you as a director, how did that affect your process? How did that affect your approach to The Heart Comes to Mind?
Yes, definitely. The fact that we had to make the difficult decision as Checkpoint Theatre to call off The Nuclear Family quite early on as this pandemic unfolded was certainly there at the back of my mind, both as a co-producer and the director of The Heart Comes to Mind. At that point, of course, it was not at all the case that we needed to call off The Heart Comes to Mind because the regulations at that point did not require it. And it was scheduled to open a bit later at the end of April. But we were, of course, working on the play, and it was an interesting thing because we talk about keeping the rehearsal space a sacred space, a safe space for the actors to come in, for the entire team to come in and to create this world, to delve into these characters. But I recall that as a team, we had to talk about what was going on. We spent quite a lot of time actually acknowledging that very real anxiety that was there as people, as well as theatre makers, and it came to a point where we decided, you and I actually, Huzir, as co-producers, we thought, look, let's anticipate, let's actually be proactive about it. And we talked to our partners at the Esplanade and said, look, can we make an alternative plan? And we came up with a proposal of actually filming the performance, and not an archival of the live performance, but we wanted to create a filmic experience of a live performance, which was a very different thing. The idea was that we would, as a backup plan, bump into the theatre with the set and with the actors and all of the performers and the lighting design, and present it as a live performance. But we would film it with the advantage of cameras, and using the cameras to really capture the essence of a live performance. So that was the plan quite early on, I have to say, and thankfully, the Aspect team were with us on this. Unfortunately, of course, that did not come about because the circuit breaker was announced about 3 weeks before we were supposed to bump into theatre for the filming of the performance.
So we'd already had, I remember, production meetings, and Joel, who would be filming it with you, together with James, who would be providing the logistics, the camera, the equipment. You were discussing angles with them. Yes. You were discussing how to film it, to really make a kind of hybrid of a live performance together with utilizing the language of film to bring it to the audience. So there was already a plan B. Right, and then the circuit breaker came into account. But before we get to circuit breaker, let me turn to Julius and Shuan. Julius, what was it like for you to rehearse in this time of the growing concern about COVID-19 and the uncertainty about whether we would go on, and how did that affect your engagement with the work as an actor?
For me, I think when it first started, right, in January and all that, we were already in the midst of, starting to rehearse and working with memorizing the lines and working with all the blockings and doing all the workshops. And for me, I was already grappling with that. And then with all this little information trickling in, and when the seriousness of the situations hit, I really didn't know quite how to handle it. It's all there, but so it was very unreal. But I think because, looking back now, I think I've been very blessed to be working during that period all the way until the whole circuit breaker on this piece with this group of people, because we talk about it, we were open about it, we dealt with the situation. So a lot of things that I was not clear, when I go into rehearsal, it was with a group of people who were open, who were openly unclear about it, but we were also open to talk about it. And talking about the situation is not just making art, but making art with all these different waves of emotions, coming every day. So one of the biggest difference is when we come into the rehearsal room, the mood sometimes is very low because of whatever information we just got the night before, or even just before we step into the rehearsal room. So it's really just sitting there and being with yourself, and then the people all slowly they come in, and we openly talk about it, we let it out, and we build. And almost every rehearsal we have to start from that area, that level of trying to make sense of whatever before we truly enter into the work. And because of that, I don't know, it gives me a sense of purpose, energy for the work. And yeah, I think I've learned so much, not just as an actor, but also as a person trying to deal with the situation with a group of people who are openly, are very honest and sincere about just being people, Yeah, it was amazing.
And I would hear some of these conversations secondhand when Claire would come home from rehearsals and tell me about it. And it was a real challenge, I think, that people in all professions were going through, about how to do your job and maintain whatever is your own individual set of standards of professional excellence, while also interrogating what your job means at this time, how you do your job safely and how you do your job meaningfully in this environment. It was also, I think, about making meaning, right? Making meaning. And that's what the privilege and also the responsibility that we have as artists to make meaning through our discipline. And I know, Shu, that was something that was very much on your mind. But can you talk about what it was like for you?
Yeah, I think during this process, it's like the process of creating the art that was very healing and also provided a lot of support, and that's kind of a lot of the magic. Yes, but I think what I really, really treasured about this process also was because every time we came in, right, sometimes we have these talks about what's happening. It could take up to half an hour or even longer than that sometimes. And this was very precious rehearsal time that we had. And yet Claire was willing to make space for that, for us to process this as people, and it's not just about come in and act and then I direct and then we create the show. It wasn't just about that. It was the process of being there for each other as people and as artists. And I remember sharing once that normally I think normally I'm pretty good at just leaving things at the door. Because it's almost something that it's a sign of professionalism, right? To leave everything at the door and to come in and to just focus on the work. But in this instance, it was so hard to do that. And like you're saying, the idea of being professional and at the same time being a person processing this hugely traumatic event is what I think, a lot of people around the world are struggling with. And I think I really deeply appreciate the space that Checkpoint created and that Claire created in that rehearsal room to just be human. Yeah, and it's not work first, it's people first, and then the work comes as a process of that. And I think I think that also fed into how safe we felt as actors, because I think apart from that, right, there was also the fact that Checkpoint very early started doing this, like logging everything, like come in, take your temperature, write down the temperature, write down your contact, like declare everything, and then wash your hands. Like it was something that was created very fast, and every time there was a new introduction of a new guideline, for example, if you had been in Malaysia, don't know when, then you had to take a stay home thing. And then sometimes the guidelines were like, is this a guideline or is it we have to follow it? But I feel like Checkpoint always prioritized the people first and just went, you're going home. Okay, you just, let's just be safe, we'll keep you at home, and then you come back after 2 weeks, you can do it remotely or like whatever. And I think that was also that kind of boundary setting and keeping us like physically safe was also something that took a lot of the anxiety off our minds. Yeah.
Can I just add? It's amazing because of all these measures that the company takes, I didn't feel it was disruptive to the whole creating process. It was so embracing that, oh, we have to do this, do we have to? Doesn't matter. We do it, then you feel safer. So as a person, I'm also learning about dealing with it wasn't a pandemic then, right? It was an epidemic. It was just dealing with the situation outside of the work. Then you realize, as a person, these are the things I have to take seriously. It's not just for show, So yeah, it was just amazing. It's just one whole journey that it takes in whatever good and bad emotions you have, and you just go through and through the work actually. Because after we talk about this, we all went back to the work, and that kind of gave us a kind of respite. I don't know, before we can move on and face another day. So wow, it's a fantastic journey.
But Claire, I think you were also particularly blessed as the director and co-producer, as having not just these two wonderful actors, but also a very dedicated and flexible team of designers and technical personnel, and of course the wonderful team at Checkpoint, who I think were really riding with the twists and turns, but they were giving so much to the production in terms of recalibrating what they needed to do and the workflow and these social distancing measures and safe working procedures.
Yes, I have to say that I am so moved and amazed at the dedication and the commitment. Absolutely, it's like what Shu and Julius were just describing, the kind of uncertainties that we had to navigate, that the world was just changing and swirling around us. And it was very important, that we acknowledged all that in order to carry on with the work. And definitely it was amazing for me looking back and seeing how the development of this play really was quite in step with how the pandemic unfolded in the larger society, and of course then it impacted the work directly eventually. But the level of focus, in a sense, that was there was remarkable. People wanted to focus. There was a sense of we shall carry on, and there was a sense of keeping the faith, which was a very powerful statement, I realized, and an expression of how important it was to each and every one of us, to the designers, to the actors, to the crew, to the team doing publicity and marketing, and definitely, of course, our friends at the Esplanade. The sense of that, look, this is important, what we're doing, and we have to stay focused, and we shall carry on until we cannot carry on. Which actually brings me to the circuit breaker, because I remember so clearly, right, that 4 p.m. PMly announcement, and by then we had moved to the next sort of the final leg of creating this work. We were about 3 weeks away from bumping into the theatre, but we had moved into the Esplanade Annex studio, which was a space that allowed us to begin bringing in large elements of the set, begin to think about putting all of the elements that we had been carefully creating before that. And we were so close. It felt like we were so close. And then the announcement came. I think there was a moment of, I guess, a stunned silence, although in a sense we were probably expecting it. But still, when it was announced that we're going into circuit breaker on Tuesday, because the announcement was made on Friday, it was definitely a blow. It was definitely a blow. Because we had also began talking about camera angles, we had begun talking about the storyboard, we had begun working out how this theatrical process would accommodate and would collaborate with the film process, which was a very interesting experience for everybody. They were all quite excited about that, sort of having a creative response to the situation. That in spite of this, let's find a creative response. Let's see how we can still somehow make the work and get it out there to the audience. If we couldn't bring them into the theatre space safely, let's see how we could bring the work out and still engage with them.
So Friday, 3rd April was PM Lee's announcement of the circuit breaker measures. I know very quickly Claire and the production team reacted, and so Saturday and Sunday you decided to film in a very rough, quite an archival way, the production where it was at that point in terms of the rehearsal, the blocking, and there had been the elements of the set were brought in. Lighting designer Patrina Tan did some lights in the rehearsal space at the Esplanade Annex, and you decided to run those sequences. So we have that footage in the can. But then importantly, you then decided to go to an audio recording that was on Monday, the day before circuit breaker measures went into effect. And I remember Esplanade being deserted, sort of locked down. Everything was sort of shut down. There was a complicated but necessary process to access it. So I want to ask Julius and Shu, what was that like going from, if you take us through from the time of the announcement and to the decision to record on camera where it was on Saturday and Sunday to the audio recording on Monday. Shu?
The process, like how we processed. Okay, let me think. I think it was like, for me, I was already prepared for it to go to whatever we could do. And this was like quite early on because, but this is just my brain, right? Because actually 1 month before that, I was already being like, I have a feeling we're going to do a film or like something. I don't think we're going to be able to get into the theater, but that is just me. And so when it happened, I was expecting it. But after we finished, I feel like I went and bought like 3 bubble teas from the new bubble tea shop at Esplanade, which is great, by the way. Go back there after all of this. It was like still open. And I sat by the water where the stage was, and I just sat there for like, I think an hour or something, thinking of like just letting everything sink in, because it was kind of going at breakneck speed, right? Because you have to adapt, and then you adapt to another form, and then it's like, okay, do we need to change anything? Do we need to change our performance styles? How are we gonna do this? How are we gonna mic it? Which way does it work with this scene, with that transition? And I remember like Claire just on the spot going like, okay, we can't take this angle, so we're gonna shift everything over here. Okay, so then how do we move from this part to that part with the music and all? I was just sorry. It was almost as chaotic as it sounded. Yeah, so it was just a lot to deal with and very fast. And also the script got a lot of words. So it was just a lot to kind of deal with. But I just remember sitting by the water after all of it thinking, I'm just so happy it was in this kind of environment. Yeah.
Julius?
It's the same for me. I mean, it really feels like the train is taking off. Get on, it's either you're on the train and there's no jumping off. So on the get set go, right? I mean, I very clearly the deep impressions I have of the faces of the people. Like Patrina came to, lights, now here, where, how? Okay. And she brought everything she had from home, because I think a lot of things were on lockdown. So she brought in all her LEDs and all that, and brought the ladders. And then when the camera people came in, we worked and worked. I mean, so I think it's not about time to think, but why are we doing this? It's let's do and see how you can do that. But of course, I remember there was a moment where I was kind of breaking down because I felt, oh, really? I mean, in terms of lines and all that. So there's still the actor in me that you're still demanding something of the self. And I was telling Claire, and I'm glad to be given time to just cool down and work something. But it is that kind of energy where, it's really, it's not about the self anymore, right? It's just everybody just chong, and then we just get this done. And then by Monday we went in the morning, 9 o'clock. I said, still got recording. Okay. But the
I did
surroundings,
warn you. I did tell you.
yeah. Because my mind is there, right? My mind's like that. So, but everything outside was closed, and it's so interestingly scary because everything was calm on the outside, and we've just come from this. And then we went into the recording, and people were setting up. It was very surreal. And then when we did it, and then we had to say goodbye. It was really tough. It was really crazy, right? Yeah. So, but because of that high, right? So going into the circuit breaker, for me, at least the first week, was a much needed break in a way, right? When I look back, I said, oh my God. So in a way, it was like a break. And then it took me that time to get real, oh my God, what is this circuit breaker? It's all about, So yeah, it's been very intense, but beautifully so.
I think that I remember thinking that I actually was regretful for the nuclear family when we had to call it off. We didn't manage to actually capture as much as we would have liked. And I think that I just decided, look, let's just go for it. And I was very, very moved because I made the decision with Huzir on Friday night. And within an hour or so, the crew was in, the designers were in, just doing their best to sort of set up as much of the space as possible. People were just working so furiously with such focus and commitment and professionalism. It was a very moving experience. I will always remember those moments just before we had to quickly rush to set up, and then we filmed throughout the weekend and on to Monday when we did the audio recording. And you're right, we kind of, in a sense, ended on a high, which was important because we had been working on this so carefully and with so much care and commitment. So I'm very glad we did that. Yeah.
I remember after the audio recording, I think we had lunch and we came back and we all played theater games in the annex for one last time. It was very distance theater games, but that was a really beautiful way to kind of bring everything to a close. Normally in that kind of situation, it would have been, I think, a lot of hugs and a lot of crying. I think but there were no hugs because cannot, and then we just, it was a nice ritual to kind of bring everything to a close.
Lucas, how did you feel?
Yeah, it was this swirl of emotions and energy. I think everybody has just kind of given their snapshot of it, and I completely agree. I mean, just being in that space in the Esplanade Annex over that weekend was just an incredible, unforgettable experience. We all knew that it was really like we had flown right into the eye of the storm, right? And it had been a long flight, so I think everybody was very worried, very concerned, but we also just very grateful to be able to work together. I think, So
we are very fortunate to have this audio recording, which then Claire worked on quite extensively with the sound designer and musician Shah Tahir in order to refine the sound design. And so I'm going to go to the questions. I think we've been caught up in a conversation, but I must look at these questions. To Claire, on that note, how did you shape and meld the music with the script and communicate your vision with the actors and musicians, Shah Tahir and cellist Ryan Sim?
I remember being very inspired when I first read the script, and I kind of sat with the script for a while, to let it sit, and then to see what floated up in my imagination, in my psyche. I was very moved by the poetry and the lyricism. I was very moved with the use of monologues and the dialogue and the the delving into the interiority of these two characters, Peter and Lynn. And somehow there was a soundscape and a musicality as well that I wanted to bring into the piece. So that's when I spoke to Shata here, and I said, look, I'm going to throw you this challenge. I want to work on this in a very different way from how we would normally design the sound or the music for a play. I really wanted the music and the sound design to be as present in the play as the actors would be. They would be another performer at times expressing something that perhaps the character was unable to express, or to counter what the characters are saying. And I therefore had to work out with Shah and the actors and Ryan how we would go about making this work, how we would go about co-composing this auditory experience of text, of the world of these characters. There was a lot of exploration there, and the idea also, of course, we wanted to have live musicians in the space with the actors. And so Shah proposed the cello because he said that the cello reminds him of a human voice almost. So for me, it was sort of weaving together with the cast, with Julius and Shu and Ryan and Shah, an auditory texture of words, definitely, Lucas's beautiful words and other emotions that were there, and I wanted to unpack all of that. So that's how it came about.
A couple of questions for Lucas about, were there parts of the script left out in the audio recording that would have made it to the stage had there been no pandemic? And similarly, in a similar vein, were there any changes made to the script as it pivoted from a live to a recorded to an audio performance? And how has the form of presentation influenced the writing, if at all?
There was nothing was changed, nothing was taken out. What you hear in the audio recording is 100% everything I wrote. No lines were cut, which is, I think, a testament to Checkpoint's work with playwrights. They don't recommend changes until it's absolutely discussed and necessary. And yeah, so there were no changes. Nothing was cut. All the scenes are there. Every line is there. I didn't make any changes to the writing when it transitioned to an audio recording, simply because, as we've been sharing, Claire chose to record it on that Monday before circuit breaker happened. So yeah, I didn't change any of the lines because the actors had so beautifully spoken and delivered them already. And I, obviously I was just to extend on that question a bit slightly. I mean, I was also, I'm obviously nervous when it gets transitioned into this, because I didn't write this play to be performed or to be received purely as a audio play. So I was a bit hesitant about, would some things translate? And yeah, I still miss the work that the actors did, the physical work. I miss the set and everything else. But the amount of polish that Shah and Claire have put into this is really quite breathtaking for me. But yeah, it is the play, it is the text, 100%.
And I think it's an audio experience that returns, I think, in several times over the amount of work that is put into it. And I think if you listening to it last night at the premiere with many of the team, I think we realized that once you surrender to it, I think the lyricism of the text and the work in detail on the characters that Julius and Shu have put in over those weeks and weeks of rehearsal with Claire, combined with the delicacy and the lack of fear of Shah's sound design as well. I think that's emerged from conversations with Claire about the sound design being that other character and being very present in telling the story. I think it for me, as someone who was obviously in the company, but outside of the rehearsal room and outside the process, I think I am moved and proud by the integrity of this final product. To Julius and Shu, another question. What were some of your favorite moments working on The Heart Comes to Mind? And was there anything different about the process compared to other shows you have worked on? And I presume because you've covered the pandemic-related things earlier, I presume just about the artistic process in general, right? Julius?
Okay, for me, I am very afraid of words, text, because I think that's my weakest, right? But somehow when I was asked to audition, when I look at the script, I mean, it struck me, and it's really something, I don't know how. I mean, I read it and I was like, something touched me and it was beautiful. So when I got it, my God, I mean, I do wish that, I mean, not now, but in fact, oh my God, the lines can cut a bit now, but it was really a lot. But as we continue to work, so no cut, don't worry. But the fact is that it forces me to look at something that I'm not used to, my comfort zone, and I'm glad to be working this way. So the biggest, I mean, there are many, many takeaways for me. I mean, getting to know the people and working under such conditions where, I mean, we've always been very serious when I work with checkpoints. So it's not going there and let's be friends, but because of the kind of focus in the work, the friendship is so different, So it's through the work that you know someone very deep without knowing them in that sense, yeah, if you know what I mean. So these are all, to me, something I've learned so much about confronting the words, the text, and using the body. So to me, this is a big learning curve, and I think it will continue. I think then that breaks something for me. So thank you very much, Claire and Shu and everybody, right, for the experience. Yeah.
Shu?
Yeah, the process. Okay, so when I said just now that we didn't have, like, time is very precious, it's also because the exercises and the way that Claire kind of like worked the text, it took it required a large amount of time. Like now you're hearing it as like the track is quite seamless and everything kind of fits, but there was so many iterations of that in the beginning, and it came out of a lot of improvisations that really focus a lot on like how you use your voice, and like the voice is an instrument, which we know, but it was kind of like it was stretched further also because of the way Claire wanted us to respond to the music and for the music to respond to us. And then also like the idea of physicality. So that is one part that we really missed out, obviously, in this auditory experience because you can't see it. But there was actually a lot of movement work that was kind of weaved into the process as well. And also the creation of the set and the space. Because actually the script, like when you read it, there's no stage direction, there's no sense. I mean, you kind of get a sense in some of the dialogue where they are, but it could really be anywhere. And so it was also creating the house that they lived in, or the office, like which part of the building is she in, what kind of office does it look like. And because the set was also meant to be quite what's that, like minimalist, it's not like you don't see like chairs and all that kind of thing. So a lot of it had to really like from scratch just like build all the way, and it was really quite a lot of like mental and physical gymnastics, I think, in that sense. Yeah, which was really very, very fruitful and very what's that word? It was just a joy to be able to work in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember towards the tail end of the rehearsal process in the Esplanade Annex, I dropped in on the rehearsal, and you guys were doing such tremendous work, and I turned to Claire and said, this feels like the acting Olympics because you have so much text and the movement is so intricate and finely tuned. It is I wish that's one thing that I miss, and hopefully they can see someday. I want to actually, sorry, I'm just hijacking this, but I want to go back to what Julia said about, you said there's a lot of text and say whether they can cut. I remember because, and this is a bit of a process, I wrote 2 drafts during the workshop phase. And I remember I came in with a new draft, and Julius read it that night, and then he came back the next day and said, hey, why do you cut this line? I love this line. Can we put it back in? So ironically, Julius, you convinced me to put some words back in for you.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, but I must say, I want to add on the workshops we did with the set. When you had no idea what it's going to be like, right? So, this kind of text can do this kind of physical work with threads and all that. So it really challenges the imagination. But when finally everything came together, wow, it's on a different level, you know. So I think the whole working with exploration, I'm not even sure whether Claire was clear about what she wants, but the whole spirit of just, I want this, she has this, let's do this, and then with the music. So the beginning workshops, wow, I mean, looking back, it's true. I mean, we've gone through quite a lot of work on like that, you know, and before we start to build. So yeah, thanks.
So we have a long and very interesting comment leading into a question for the team, which I think has to do with our working practices since COVID. And the comment is, since COVID-19 struck Singapore, we've seen an onslaught of digital content being uploaded online, either in the form of archival footage of past productions, i.e. not meant for public online consumption at the point where they were originally filmed, or deliberate decisions to do live presentations through platforms like Zoom. And what the commenter finds fascinating about The Heart Comes to Mind is how it occupies a space in between. Claire just shared about how Checkpoint had already been anticipating the possibility of not being able to stage the show in its original theatrical format, hence the plans to make a filmic version. But even these plans were scuppered by the worsening COVID situation, which meant that the team had to suddenly readapt Heart Comes to Mind into its current audio format. And this is the question. To anyone on the Heart Comes to Mind team on a visceral level, how does it feel to have to deal with the tentativeness of having to constantly readapt your mode of theatre making, or let's expand that to art making, because of forces beyond your control? And how has the entire process of working on The Heart Comes to Mind shaped how you approach theatre making in the months or even the years to come? Claire?
I think that there is a need, the sense of creative response keeps coming to me. I think that the sense of wanting the work to meet an audience was very important. I really appreciate the commentator's observation about how we were indeed trying to create, to occupy an in-between space. And I think that is something that is our role as artists, to respect the tools of art making. And for me, to create a piece, a work that is to be experienced live in a space is going to be very different from one that has to be experienced through the digital platform. And I think that is why I was very excited about that possibility of how do we use the technology to still capture the live performance and communicate that, and therefore respecting the tools and not trying to squeeze something that was not meant to be into a form. So, and that is where that openness and that curiosity, and I suppose not being overcome by fear, the fear of the unknown. Can this be done? I think that role as like, let's try, let's imagine, let's have that conversation, let's see how we can make it work. And it is going to be exploration, and it might be a work that will surprise us, hopefully. If it fails, it's okay. I think the fact is that that's something that we have to keep overcoming. If the worst thing that can happen is failure, we cannot let that hold us back. And in a sense, that is what we try to do whenever we are trying to make a work. And I'm always interested in pushing boundaries, pushing ourselves out of the comfort zone, not for the sake of just doing it, not for, not just to see, let's see where we can go, but in a very rigorous way, and really rigorous investigation of how can this work communicate, how can it touch, how can we open up other layers. And it's a very good question about what it means as we look forward to this world where we now have to find very new ways of engaging the audience. And it's something that we are grappling with. I don't think we have the answer. We certainly have a lot of ideas. at Checkpoint with our different collaborators and friends. It's something we're talking about and certainly working out, what is this new space that we can occupy, and how can the work still engage in a way that serves the text, that serves the characters, that serves the stories that we're telling. But that is what we are, right? That I think we cannot help but be creative in a sense, and we have to overcome the fear and to embrace that almost in our art making. It's like what Julius and Shu said. We have to accept that this is what our humanity, and that comes with a lot of uncertainty and yet together I think we can support each other and push to reach those heights or depths.
Julius and Shu, how do you see your working practices changing? How do you see your artistic practice as performers, as creators, changing as we go forward? Julius?
I really don't know, I mean, it's still a lot of, because just taking the step outside the house and meeting people, already, even if you don't think about it, this prolonged period of just isolating in some sort of isolation is something new. So I think as a person, let alone an actor, I'm also learning how to adjust. But the experience I've got from working on this piece, I mean, it shows that, I mean, you're not alone. You're not the only one dealing with it. It takes a whole team. And I think at the end of it, what really pulled me through a lot of these situations is trust. Trusting in this group of people and noticing that everybody is also facing the same thing. But at the same time, you take courage and it's like improvisation. It's always scary, right? Because you don't know. But then again, you just go and have fun in a way, not frivolous fun, but really very seriously looking at it and working with it and then find something. So I think for me, I'm just dealing with it like that, So yeah, I think really the spirit of art making or team building is all there. Yeah. Thank you.
Shu?
For me, the idea of, I think for me, I'm also thinking about the logistic side of things because to create, we do need to be present in a space. Doing shoots, theater, any kind of, and all the essential work right now, if it requires you to be present, that's something that you kind of can't run away from. But at the same time, I guess trust is also created when there are clear boundaries, because we are dealing with something that is highly contagious, right? And that really could, it's highly contagious and it is a dangerous virus. So that's something that we have to be quite, I don't know. I mean, the answer is I don't know, but I also do wonder how we create physically safe spaces with very clear guidelines for people to feel safe to go back to work. Because I feel in this kind of situation, the idea of personal responsibility is a given, but it's not enough, right? We do need rules. How do we function in a safe way so that we can create art? Because if this goes on for a long time, I think we also don't want to stop the creation of art, right? I mean, that's something that we do want to do, but also at what expense, I think. And for all the essential workers as well, also the same question, at what expense? Yeah. So is it people first? Is it professionalism first? Is there a way to kind of meet both of those two things together in a way that is sustainable in the long run and doesn't sacrifice anybody's? Yeah. So I think that's kind of where my mind's at, because it's just, if you can't run away from being present, then how do we make it safe?
Lucas, as someone who engages in multiple ways with the world of art and theater making, as a playwright, as a sometimes actor and director, as an editor, sort of thinking about the texts of plays, and also, of course, as an educator, dealing with students who are either writers themselves or are sort of learning to appreciate the world of the performing arts. You're I guess being obliged to consider the changes in the landscape in multiple dimensions as things progress. What are your thoughts so far?
I think I completely agree with Shu and Julius and Claire what they just said. I think the priority should be to take care of each other, both emotionally, psychologically, and on a health, physical basis. But also, I think what this period of human history has shown us is that the saying "the show must go on." We have to reassess what that means to us. What is the show, and how can it go on, right? And I think this is a question that, regardless of whether you're in the arts, is something we have to ask ourselves. How can we continue to make a life, even if we COVID-19? But for me also, I think while there is a lot of processing that has to be done and should be done, I think it's a good time where we learn. We learn to reflect on our own, and we learn to help each other through this period. I think if we engage in that work, I think we will be better as a human race, and it will also, I think, enrich the art that we make. On a more practical front, right? I think creators are going to really engage with this kind of platform. We're going to see plays that are written for Zoom. I 100% believe that, right? And that's great. And I think what this new mode of making art and presenting art has done is that it's democratized it further, because now anybody can put on a show online. I do, of course, worry about how we're going to monetize it, how we're going to make sure that the creators are adequately reimbursed for their time. But I think we will find our way there. I think, as so many of you have said, we don't know. We don't have the answers. But if we take care of each other, we'll be all right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, really, it's important to kind of like to be taking care of each other. I mean, okay. So I'm just gonna do this. So even though they totally didn't have to, because the contract did not require it, like Checkpoint still paid everyone in the creative team, because they also were saying that we want to look after you in this time, and we want to help you ease through this transition. We understand there's also a big shock, and they took that step to really to look after the people who they were working with, and I really appreciate that. So yeah, when you say like look after each other, there is a need for us to really look out for each other, and yeah, we can't do it alone, man. Yeah. Sorry, that was so how are we going to create art in the future? It really requires everyone to come together, and sorry, that was not very eloquent.
If I may just quickly say, I also do realize that people are very adaptive and flexible. We do adapt very quickly, and I am hopeful that we will think of how we can both create work, getting together physically in a very safe way, and then maybe that's the thing that has to be adjusted for it to all be a bit, we can't do too much contact work, exploration, and similarly in getting the audience to counter. I do hope that we will learn to appreciate how special the experience is, to experience a live performance, and I hope that together we will make that happen. But it does need systemic changes. I think it does need every individual taking on a responsibility to make it safe and to make it financially possible as well.
So I want to thank the Heart Comes to Mind team for their time, and to all of you viewers for staying with us and for your questions. At Checkpoint Theatre, we believe in the power of stories, in particular original Singapore stories. And as with the Heart Comes to Mind, we will always find a way for those stories to be told. So if the audience can't come to us, we will go to them with our strong writing, performance, and direction as our core tenets. We hope you've enjoyed the Heart Comes to Mind. We're very grateful to our friends and partners at the Esplanade for making this possible as our co-presenters. So please do share your thoughts and comments with us on Checkpoint Theatre's social media platforms. And with that, thank you, and I will pass it back over to Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Huzir, and thank you so much, Julius, Shuen, Lucas, Claire, and Huzir again, for the generous sharing of each of your experiences of the process through this pandemic and how we'll continue to soldier on with art making together. So what a journey it truly has been and continues to be. Thanks also to everyone who's joining us at home. We hope you enjoyed the dialogue as well. The Heart Comes to Mind audio experience continues to be available on Esplanade's Offstage until this Friday, the 12th of June. If you enjoyed it, please do spread the word. And if you can't get enough, do also check out the behind the scenes video on how music became a third character in the show in a conversation with Claire, Shuen, and composer musicians Shah Tahir and Ryan Sim. This is also available on Offstage. Now, this may be our final chat, but it is definitely not goodbye. For updates and more information, please like and follow the studio's Facebook page, as well as Checkpoint's social media pages. And of course, to find out more about the entire studio's online season, please visit esplanade.com/offstage/theatre. Sorry to renege. Once again, if you would like to show your support to Esplanade, Checkpoint Theatre, and other Singapore arts groups, please visit giving.sg. You can also find direct links on the respective production pages on Offstage. And finally, thank you once more for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the studio's online season and Sunday. Do take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.